Welcome to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching Podcast, where we're all about helping healthcare professionals like you create positive change at work, at home, and everywhere in between. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching Podcast. And so we are super excited this week to be joined by Evala Rahm, professional coach. And we're going to be talking a bit today about how do we actually maintain habits and about what sober leadership superpowers there are for those of you who identify that way. So it's March. And those New Year resolutions have fallen off by the wayside for most of us. And so this episode's for you. We're going to be talking a bit about what being sober curious is, what sober living might entail, why it's so hard. And also we're going to talk a bit about what many in healthcare continue to stigmatize, which is substance dependence and misuse disorders, and what life really looks like as a leader living in sobriety. So Evala, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Well, hi, Lillian. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for inviting me onto your podcast. I love talking about recovery and recovery for professionals. Just a little bit about myself. I personally have been sober for 41 years. Just a few weeks ago, I passed that very long milestone because that also means I'm 41 years older. But I have a master's degree in counseling. I was a drug and alcohol counselor for the Army way back, and through a series of literal moves, and my ex-husband was a military person, and just life changes, I found coaching. And I love coaching because for me, therapy is here is where you are and how did you get here? And coaching is here's where you are and here's where you want to go, and let's get you there, and let's put some action plans. Like you mentioned, habits, let's put some new habits in, reinforce the ones that are working, get rid of the ones that aren't working, and put some plans in place so we can be accountable so we can really reach those goals. And so I've created a program that kind of takes leadership coaching. I'm a leadership coach, and I know there's a lot of health-related people on this podcast who like to watch this podcast, so we'll talk a little bit about some of that. But as a leadership coach, I take what I've learned through working with clients in recovery, through my knowledge of 12-step programs, and integrate that in with leadership coaching, because what works is we know the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's been around almost 90 years. It's helped millions and millions of people. It's grown to over 153,000 groups. I think that was the 2011 number. So all over the world. So even if you just imagine an average of 10 people per AA group, and we've all seen TV and movies where they show AA meetings or 12-step meetings, and that's a lot of people in recovery on a daily basis. And so there's a huge demographic out there that has a large stigma around it. I'm working with a woman now. She, the CEO of this organization, is called PAR, People Advocating Recovery. She does a lot of work at the legislative level, and she is really working on transitioning how we name things, how the words that we use around addiction and substance abuse to substance use disorder, SUD, is what we see a lot in literature, in articles. But it's so stigmatizing when people say alcoholic or drug addict or crackhead or overeater or gambler. All of these addictive behaviors can be super destructive. The person themselves already is in a place of shame. So we who are in the helping community don't really need to add to that.
Right. So that's really important work that you're doing in terms of really melding all of your prior experiences and also moving people forward and really changing the landscape for what it means to be having been sober from any kind of addiction that could really be addiction, and to be living a different lifestyle. And so I think it's a lot for us to all learn from the goal setting and the habits and the mental self-talk in the work that you do as a leadership coach, and also for people who are recovered from any kind of addiction. So I guess I'll start off first with, why do you think so many people struggle to even stick to New Year resolutions or goals?
Oh, gosh. Well, when it comes to substances, they are such an integrated part of our society, and not even in the United States, but all over the world. When I was young, I mentioned my ex-husband being in the military. We lived in Germany, and it was really hard to get something that wasn't alcoholic when we go out to eat or to celebrate. And being a military spouse, I would attend events, and there was always a toast. And so I had a Coke or water or something when everyone else was drinking. And that was 30 something years ago. And that hasn't changed. We see how cutting the grass, there's a TV commercial for a nice sweaty Bud Light bottle, just waiting when that grass is finished cutting, or everybody goes out for bunko or ladies' night and they're all drinking a glass of wine. And even I think, I don't know if you saw the note that I left you, but just a few weeks ago, all over the news was how alcohol is cancerous. It causes cancer now. So where everyone thought having a glass of wine an evening to unwind with the resveratrol and it was good for you and for your heart, they're now finding the benefits of that do not outweigh the risk of cancer. And so how do we switch? So a lot of people that I know that are in very social settings, I have some friends who are volleyball players, and they've noticed that people have stopped drinking and switched to psychedelics or THC drinks or other things. So substance use is not going to just disappear. It's a relief. It's a social lubricant. And it makes it really hard for someone who's coming out of a professional environment where everyone is drinking. And how do I not drink? And how do I have the Shirley Temple looking drink in my hand when everybody else has a bourbon on the rocks or some sort of margarita? Then that person themselves, even though no one else may even pay attention or care what they're doing, they feel like they don't fit in anymore because now they're not drinking for whatever reason. If they're trying dry January, if they're pregnant and don't want to drink during their pregnancy, if they have a religious obligation, or they're just trying to do something different, whether it's just a plain old habit change. They've noticed that maybe I'm drinking a little too much. It disrupts my sleep. I'm foggy in the mornings when I get up. I just don't want to do it anymore for whatever reason. It's very difficult when your habit, your system is ingrained in, I get home from work and I have a glass of, or I go out with people after work, or we go golfing or bowling or shopping. And when we go out to eat, we're going to have something on the green or at the mall or wherever it is. It's very hard to break that habit, number one, because our habits have these little neural pathways developed for a long time. And if we've been drinking since we were a teenager, which most people, I would guess, started to experiment at that time, and we're in our 30s or 40s, that's many years of habit that has to change. So that's one of the reasons I think that it's so difficult for people to shift into the new habit and really get it ingrained, because sometimes it's just too tempting to fit in. Sometimes the feelings of discomfort are just too much. And well, tomorrow I'll just stop. Tonight I'm just going to have one. But if they do suffer from a substance use disorder, they aren't going to stop with just one. They could end up in another state 2 days later, not knowing how they got there. They could blow the big deal that they were supposed to be in charge of. They could get into a fight with a peer or an employee or a supervisor, or go home and throw something against the wall and end up in jail for a night. There are many things that can happen just by saying, well, tomorrow is when I'm going to stop. Tonight, it's just too uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think you really hit the nail on the head with the fact that so many of these habits are accidentally ingrained into us. And I really love also what you commented about the social lubricant is just sort of normalized culturally around the world in different cultures and different settings. So it gives us all at least a reason to understand, okay, it's not me that's failing. It's the system and the culture and the world is accidentally imprinted a different identity of what that needs to look like. And so you and I both are familiar with energy leadership. And it's funny, I just think about going back to the very beginning of our training, and the very fundamental work that we do when we first have clients is about the I am, and really thinking about the identity. And I think what we're really lucky now in this day and age, people have capitalized on other beverages that are different and cool. The mocktails are very cool now. Almost every single bar you go to now has a wider, expansive, creative culinary beverage made without spirits, or different types of spirits that have some kind of vitamin or ashwagandha in it. I think we're lucky in a different age. And I think this is also why people are talking quite a bit more about sober curiosity and dry January and things like that. And so I guess I'll get from your perspective, what does it actually mean to be sober curious, and why is this movement gaining traction, do you think?
Well, I have many opinions on the sober curious movement, but my daughter, who is 29, it helps me to know how old I am because I'm 30 years older than she is. So I'm 59, she's 29. So she's 29, and she and I have had many conversations around this because it seems like her age group, a lot of people are trying to not do it. Of course, I don't know, I'm sure you've heard of California recovery, which basically is, well, I smoke pot, I don't drink. But from someone who works in the field of addiction, of people who cannot control their usage once they have one or two drinks or hits or pills or gummies or whatever it is. Once we're talking about person who has a problem, really abstinence is the key, because they can't have one. And it's so easy to get in the mindset of not going for 2 months, 2 years and going, "What? I think I can handle it now." And then finding out, because there's a chemical change. It's like taking a cucumber. When you take a cucumber and you turn it into a pickle, it cannot go back to being a cucumber again. It is going to always be a pickle. So
Right.
it's the same way with someone who is an addict, someone who has the addictive nature when it comes to using chemicals socially. It turns into the addiction. They cannot go back to being a normal drinker, because the change in the brain, and there's all sorts of research on this that anyone can Google. I do not retain information very well, so I can't really spit anything out. But I do know that when they do brain scans after people have died, they see that there is a different shape of their brain and the way that their brain has been functioning once they've crossed into alcoholism or once they've crossed into active addiction. So, sober curiosity is awesome. It is a great way for people to kind of make a decision. Do I have a problem? Am I trying to go through January or 3 months or a year or a pregnancy, and I am just angry all the time because everyone else can drink and I can't? It's almost like I don't have a choice. I'm a martyr in this situation. And so to be able to shift out of that mindset, to be able to get out of it long enough to go, wait a minute, why am I even doing this? Well, because, and I mentioned earlier, I'm having trouble sleeping. I get in fights with people when I drink that. I can't control my mouth. It gets me in trouble with everyone, or people get in physical altercations. These are things that only happen to me when I'm drinking or when I'm smoking. And so let me try and do something about it and see if this is really the problem or not. The reason 12-step programs work so effectively is because there's a group of people all on the same mission. And as you mentioned, we know energy leadership. So when you and I and other energy leadership coaches get together, we're all on the same page. We understand each other. It's the same way in recovery. When you have a bunch of people who are all on the path to get sober and live a sober life with all the spiritual, mental, financial, emotional benefits that that brings, that means you still have to go through the scary parts, the hard parts of looking at ourselves, our behaviors. What are we accountable for? What is someone else accountable for? If someone else is accountable for that, how do I let go? How do I let go of trying to control those situations and be okay with myself and go, they're who they are. I have my own decisions to make over here, and I'm just going to have to make those. All of that can be really scary for a normal average person, not even someone who's an alcoholic or someone who has a substance use disorder. So then we take that and go, here's a group of people who have gone through it sober. We understand, we get it. And they bond and they can move together through those difficult situations, deaths, divorces, kids going off to college, becoming empty nesters, retirement, all of these major shifts that people don't know what to do can be really painful for some people. And then, of course, now, presently, we have this huge epidemic of loneliness. So you throw loneliness in on top of, now I'm shifting all of these old habits that I had that I believed used to bring me joy, even though the negative consequences got greater and greater and the positive less and less. Switching that, and I'm super lonely, and I'm scared to meet new people, even though there's a group readily made for me. One of the things I also like to talk about here is that when we think about the savannah where the lions are chasing the antelope that are on the edges of the herd are the ones that get taken down, but the ones who are in the center of the herd are the ones who stay safe. So a lot of times when we have new people in recovery, it's important for them to know that being in the middle is going to help keep you safe, especially in those times when you don't feel like you can be safe yourself.
I love this analogy. That analogy is beautiful, really, in terms of really trying to explain, well, why community is so important. And especially anyone who's been through recovery or wants to no longer be in addictive patterns of behavior. And what would people who are sober and like you, 41 years sobriety, want to tell people who have never been through it or people who don't identify that way? I bet there's some common perspectives that there is something special about being with other people in community who say, yep, I'm 20 years sober. Yeah, I'm 30 years sober. I wonder if there's one thing that if you could try to encapsulate for those of us who can't imagine.
Well, one of the things I do want to say is that I am not here to represent any 12-step program. I'm just talking about the benefits of them.
Right.
But I do know that as someone with long-term recovery, many of the people that, well, I have several different social networks, but when I do hang out with people who are also sober, they're not necessarily in AA. They don't necessarily go to meetings, but there's a friend of mine, he's an architect, and he also has 42 years sober. And so it's almost like a club or something. I'm not going to say it's a guru thing, but for me personally, being able to help new people come in and go through the process and go, I know some of the stuff that we need to do to get through our life clean, mentally, emotionally, physically, to get through there, it's going to be uncomfortable and it could even be painful. But I know that you can do it because I did it. And if I could do it, anybody can do it. And to be able to be there to be of service to someone else, it's so rewarding that I don't continue to do it necessarily for my recovery. So I stay sober. So I'm still, but that is a byproduct of helping someone else. But the feeling of purpose, which I believe everyone who's a human being is looking for, I want to be of service. I want to have a purpose that serves a greater community than just me as the individual or just me as the family. I believe that when we can be in alignment with that purpose and take actions based on that, we started off this conversation with habit change. It makes habit change a lot easier because we know what our values are and we know what decisions to make. And we can make a decision based on, is this in alignment with my value or not? And so on this call, since we're talking about being sober and being sober curious, or being committed to recovery, being in long-term recovery, there are still habits that need to be changed. And I need for those decisions about those habits to be made based on what my values are.
You literally can capture so much of what we do with our clients in the beginning of that journey. Because I remember even with my own coach back in the day, I don't think I actually knew or understood those things. And so I think what you're pointing out is really how important it is to be in community with those who do understand the journey and can support you along the way, whether it be in a formal program or in a community of others, a network of professionals, and or with a coach who understands. And that would be someone like yourself.
You know, I just wanted to take a quick second to say thank you. Seriously. It means a lot that you're here with us, diving into these real conversations about life and healthcare. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, we'd love to have you join our regular crew. Just hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening from. It really helps us keep these authentic conversations going. All right, where were we?
I'm curious, why is there so much stigma around substance dependence, especially in healthcare?
Well, I did a little research around this. And I also, over the many years that I've worked with people, when I lived in another state, I was working with a woman through coaching who was a nurse who lost her license because she was stealing from the pharmacy at the hospital where she worked, right? So she was banned from the hospital. And so we were working together to get her license back and have to go through the process. I don't know if you or anyone on this call has ever watched the show Nurse Jackie, which is a great show about a nurse who is an active drug addict, and it's very real. So there's a huge stigma around people in the healthcare because people in the healthcare industry are supposed to be healthy and role models and doing all of the things. However, people in the healthcare industry also suffer a lot of burnout, are normal human beings who have their own issues that they can take into work or take work home. And so the stigma is, if I am in an industry where I'm supposed to be healthy, I'll just give you an example. I'm a coach. I'm a leadership coach. Sometimes my behaviors are not very leadershipy. I'm ashamed sometimes of my behaviors because they are like, you do not have your act together. What are you doing? Getting in somebody's face and sticking your finger in their face going, you shouldn't have done this and you should. Not very leadership coachy. So when we look at people in the healthcare industry, it's the same way. There are expectations that we have societally, that you have, that I have, of what a person who works in the healthcare industry, whether it's a coach, a nurse, a doctor, even someone who is an administrative person in the office at a hospital, they're still in the healthcare industry and they're supposed to with expectations represent that industry. So there's a stigma there because we want to keep things secret. We don't want people to know that we aren't in alignment with what our values are, with what we say is important to us. And I also want to say that it doesn't just stay in the healthcare industry. When we're talking about substance use disorder, there's a lot of shame everywhere. People don't want to keep secrets. Say I'm a salesperson and I'm taking out a client for lunch and I really want more than one martini. But number one, the expense report says you can only have one. So I'm going to go to the bar on my own tab and have a couple and sneak them. So by the time the lunch is done, I'm drunk and no one knows why, because they've only seen me have my one martini at the table, because there's shame involved in it. Typically, when a person gets to the point where they're questioning whether there's a problem, everyone else already knows there's a problem. So the stigma is there. It's so funny that I run into so many people who say, I just don't want people to know I'm an alcoholic or that I'm a drug addict. I'm like, they already do. They would be so happy to know that you're sober now or that you're working on that, because everyone on the outside has seen all the negative stuff, the arrests, the domestic disputes, the broken projects, the broken promises, families. Everyone else has seen it except the person who is involved. They can't see it until they have some sort of awakening.
Wow. That one just needs to sit with for a little bit because, I guess a hard piece of news, I think, for a lot of people to realize, wait, actually, everyone else already might know. And I think then to add on, especially for healthcare professionals who are trying to hide it or trying to figure out what to do, a lot of times they don't know where to go get help. Even though they're like living inside the healthcare industry, they don't know actually where they can get confidential help, even though all substance abuse treatment is actually all confidential. They still feel like they don't know where to get the help. And I think the other hard thing is licensing. So the licensing boards for each state, if you actually do a report or have any kind of substance abuse or events such as arrests that are related to substance abuse, can actually be a huge black mark. And then you are worried that you don't have an income, you don't have a living, you don't have ability to actually work in your profession. So there are some very high stakes, and some organizations are really trying to make sure that some of these legal protections to try to make sure that healthcare professionals can find the help that they need, and also destigmatize and also protect healthcare professionals. So, for example, some states actually have programs where after you go through treatment and you're away from work for a little bit, there's very structured ways for physicians, for example, who have substance abuse to actually go through a state level program to make sure that they're actually able to return to work safely and that they are cared for, just like you said, with a supportive group of individuals who've been there before, and to destigmatize the entire process and know that they're in good hands. And when you realize you are not the first person, and when you realize there are actually supportive ways that your state medical society is trying to help you, it takes the burden off for many clinicians. But many clinicians are still not aware of these things.
Well, and I just don't think it's very public. I know that there are, I'm not going to say secret 12-step meetings, but there are professionals only meetings. And I know someone who is a professional and she chooses not to go to those meetings, and not for any reason in particular, but you almost have to know someone to get the invite into it, like a secret society. But I know that they're out there and they do exist. And I'm sure all it would take is some asking around. If you have anyone in your life, or anyone on the podcast listening has anyone in their life that is struggling with finding a support group, it's so important to have that support. Someone you can just bare your soul to when you want to strangle a client or run somebody off the road in traffic because you're late because you got a call on your pager. I guess pagers don't really exist anymore. I don't know why that came into my mind. But if you're on call and you got called in and now you're late, your patient's getting ready to have a baby and you're late and you are kind of, gosh, if I could just have a shot of bourbon, it would just calm my nerves, but I can't do that anymore. To have a group of people that you can just go, this is what happened, this is what I wanted to do, I did it, or I didn't do it, and someone who understands on the other end of the phone goes, I get it, I understand, as soon as you're done with your shift or whatever, give me a call and we can talk. That is a benefit that people have who seek that out, but the person has to seek it out.
Yes. And just really a great point. I think a lot of people don't want to hear, but you do need to help yourself. in many ways, and you finding the supports. And so I guess you mentioned some of these more secret or private, very professional sort of clubs or just networked individuals who now sort of stick together, and also formal 12-step programs. Why do you think 12-step programs are so effective for so many people?
Well, I think it's because of the community, the unity and the community and the common purpose. The mission statement is basically by helping other people that the individual will stay sober, that when the individual stays sober, the group, the organization itself will thrive. There really are no set rules in any 12-step meeting. There's principles that basically help keep the groups together so that they can help other people. But there's no fees, there's no dues, there's no real rules. Everything is kind of dictated by a group of people voting. Yes, we like you to be the next person in charge for the month. You can make the coffee. Or no, you're not really sober long enough to make coffee yet. We don't trust you. It's not going to taste very good. So what, but it's a group organization. And I don't know about you, but I know that when I feel like, at least in my life, I have 2 or 3 people who understand and get me. I know Brene Brown talks about the importance of having a group. Not everybody in the world does not need to know my business, but she recommends taking a 1-inch square piece of paper and writing the names of the people that you trust enough to tell your innermost secrets to, and then just keep it in your wallet or your purse or something, because you can't fit very many names on a 1-inch piece of paper. I mean, it's a sticky note is 3 by 3. So just picture a tiny little 1/9 of that. And so to just have 2 or 3 people, that is what recovery groups provide. And it can be AA, it can be other there's so many recovery groups available now. But there's a group of people out there who are marching on the same path that they're marching on. And hopefully they're a little further along it. So when the new person comes in and they go, this is what's happening, that other person go, oh yeah, that happened to me. Or that happened to Susie Q. I can give you her phone number. She can tell you what happened. And you have a group that can help you move through it and stay sober or drug-free or on your food maintenance plan or whatever it is that you're trying. Again, going back to our early conversation of habits, it is habit that needs to be changed. With chemical-related habits, it's just a little more difficult because there is that physical craving that goes along with it and the brain change that's gone on.
That's such great insight. And I just think about like I remember when I was a new mom, I was like, oh, finding mom groups is really important it's a whole new world. You have no idea what you're doing. So finding different mom groups is very helpful. But by hearing you also say that by going through the structured program is even more helpful because there are sort of rules of engagement and structures for how you grow in the group even. And that alone gives you some comfort to know that you're not the first person to go through rather than like a mom's group, which is very unstructured and is more for social networking and sharing of tips. This is much more important because of those structures too that are within 12-step programs and different other programs.
Hey, I'm loving where this conversation's going. And it actually reminds me, if any of this is hitting home for you, I just wanted to let you know about something pretty cool we've got going on. We've got this amazing team of 5 coaches who really get what it's like to be in healthcare. And they're available for one-on-one sessions if you want to dig deeper into your own journey. Plus, we've created this whole community called Med Thrive. Think of it as your professional growth space with self-paced learning and monthly group coaching calls where we all support each other. Just putting that out there in case it speaks to you. You can check it out whenever you're ready. Now, let's get back to this great conversation.
Well, and I don't even know if important is the word, because what we're talking about is all intrinsic. It's all inside of us. So when we are at a place where we're lost, we don't know what to do next, and we're in a group where someone else might be able to, it doesn't matter if it's a mom's group or a 12-step group or something else, a group of architects who are bumping up against professional, whatever that group is, when we have a common bond and we can share with each other that bone yucky part that we like to keep hidden away because we're worried that you aren't going to like me or I'm going to get rejected or made fun of or judged. So I'm just going to keep that inside and let it kill me instead. This is where it all comes together. So it doesn't matter what group it is. A mom's group is just as important as a group of people in recovery, because moms so often go through postpartum depression. We hear so many terrible stories about abuse because they just don't know how to handle situations with a 2-year-old. So that's not really postpartum anymore. But when we don't understand what's happening with us, we make decisions sometimes, and then we take action based on that don't really benefit me or the people around me. That
Such
probably
good
totally
insight.
went off topic. I think that went completely off topic from what you asked me, but
No, so these are such great insights. I think at the end of the day, what you're suggesting is that there's so many different ways to get support, and groups do serve a really vital, important way. And you can be part of many groups. That's the beauty of life and all of these different ways of being supported. I guess, what advice would you give to someone who feels like they need to wear a mask to succeed in their career and pretend to be someone they're not?
let's just call that what it is, completely draining. It is draining for that person to have to carry that impossible task of always being on, of always being happy, of always being organized, of always being the answer person. That is so draining and heavy. It is just rough. So that's the first thing I have to say. And that you are not alone. If you are the person wearing that mask, if you are the person who tells yourself, okay, here we go again, I'm leaving the house to go to a job where the weight of the world is on me and I have to make all of these decisions and magical answers and they all have to work. Imagine what it would be like if you could just allow yourself to say, I don't know. Could you ask Bob? Could you ask Susie? I don't have the answer to that. Let me get back to you tomorrow. Not in 5 minutes, because I'm not going to put that question above everything else that I already have to do. But to be able to set some boundaries for yourself, professionally especially, because we can be so taken advantage of if we're wearing the mask and everything looks perfect. Because what happens is, if everything looks easy for me, I'm going to continue to get stuff put on me because it looks so easy. And I remember when I was a stay-at-home mom and everybody always wanted me to bake cookies. And I'm like, I don't have time for this. But you're a stay-at-home mom. Of course you have time. It's like, no, I don't. I have other things happening in my life. As much as I liked to bake cookies, I don't want to do it because you think I have time to do it. So it's the same way with people who wear the mask. We can make everything look really easy so that we're just going to give this task or ask you to take this extra task on, even though you can't afford to do it emotionally and mentally, and maybe even physically with your time. You're going to have a very difficult time saying no because you have a mask to keep wearing. And so to start, I would suggest getting a coach, getting a therapist, talking to someone about what's going on, because the relief that comes from being able to take that mask off at work, it will then transfer over to your personal life. Because my guess is, and it's just my guess, if it's going on at work, everything has to be perfect at home too. You got to be the perfect neighbor, the perfect host or the hostess. You have to have the perfect golf game or the perfect gym, or the perfect weight or the perfect face, whatever it is. Taking off that mask in one area will help you to take it off in all areas. And the relief that comes from that is something, I mean, I can't describe other than it's just amazing. Oh, I mean, when you're wearing the mask, you can't breathe. In Halloween, if you're wearing a mask, you can't breathe. It's the same way. You can't breathe when you're wearing a mask. And so even just me talking about it was making me short of breath, but just imagining taking it off. Oh, it's like lifting a weight off your shoulders.
That's incredible. And it's funny because it's one of those things where it's also about choosing with intention, that you can put the mask on for a couple minutes and then take it off. And you have different durations. And at the same time, finding one that actually fits you better might be a better way to go. One that's quieter, not being able to breathe. Maybe just actually doing a little bit of face paint and might be a more reasonable way to go. Maybe just like a little accent sticker by your eye so you don't have to put on the whole rubber thing. So the reality is, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because I think we tell ourselves stories for quite long periods of time. I mean, starting once we hit college, we try on other people's identities and other people's stereotypes of ourselves, and then we actually begin to internalize them. And so much of the work we do in the early parts with clients is actually just questioning, what do I want to keep? What do I want to keep, and what is part of me? What parts of my culture? What parts of my religion? What parts of my upbringing and the way I've tried things on? I want to keep these for now. I might change some of these later, but just for the next year, I'm probably going to keep certain ones of them and then make small incremental change to try on different ways of being. which then goes towards the habits. I'm curious because obviously from the identity comes everything else. And what you're suggesting is when you're authentic with yourself, you can then understand with intention where you want to go. And yet our habits are the ones that keep us trapped. And so to end our podcast today, why are habits so hard to change? And even though when we know they're not serving us, even when we know they're not aligning with our authentic nature, any tips that you can shed on how to help our habits?
Well, one of the things that you mentioned was when we go to college, we put these masks on. But I would suggest that it goes further than that. Back to when we were kids, we learned how to perform to get what we wanted, even as 5-year-olds. Our coaching program talks about having filters from teachers and parents and ministers and experiences that we've had that have shaped and formed us. And sometimes when we're wearing those masks or we have habits that we have that worked for us at one point because they were survival skills, that we had to do things a certain way so we could fit in a group when we were in school or on some sort of sports team, or so mom or dad wouldn't yell at us or grandmama wasn't mad, or we didn't have to go to confession and confess our sins. Whatever reasons, we learned certain habits would get us certain things. And then we changed and we grew. And like you said, we realized some of those habits just don't work for us anymore. And so being able to shift those, and I think I've talked about this before, but it's my favorite book is Atomic Habits. I usually have it sitting next to me, but I don't now.
It's my
It's my
favorite
favorite
book
book. I've
too.
read it 3
Yeah,
times
same.
now. I have it highlighted. I have it on Audible. But one of the things that it reminded me of was those neural pathways that we have. So we have a way of doing something that's just going straight down this neural pathway. And it was formed a long time ago, whether it's I like to have grilled peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and I like my peanut butter and jelly to go all the way to the edges, and I like the butter to go all the way to the edges, and then I'm going to cook it, and it's going to be exactly the way I want it because that's the way I've always done it, right? So that we had to learn how to do it. We had to know that we liked it, and then we got into a path and it became a habit. So this is the only way we will make a grilled peanut butter and jelly sandwich. However, something comes up and we can't do that anymore. We can't use the favorite pan that we used to use to make the sandwich. So we have to change it. What happens in our brain is we have a straight concrete, like on the side of the road, the concrete drains that go to the sewer. It goes fast. There's nothing in there. But now we have to change something. So we've got that path, but we want to go off of that concrete drain, and we have to go through the grass, and we have to keep doing it enough times so that the grass flattens out, and then the grass flattens out and goes away. So now we have a little dirt path, but the water's starting to flow faster, and it's starting to go better, and it's starting to go smoother because we consciously had to walk that way, smash the grass, have the grass disappear. Now it's dirt, to the point where we're not thinking about it anymore. It's just become a new habit, but it's diverted off the old habit. And then eventually we can have the little road crews come in and make that a new concrete ditch. But it takes a while for that grass to flatten out, for it to disappear, for it to just be dirt, for things to start moving smoother and faster. The research says it takes a minimum of 60 days to change a habit to where you don't have to think about it so much anymore. And of course, that there are all sorts of ways to encourage the habits and to discourage the bad habits. But I like to look at it that way. It's a process and it takes a while. And in the beginning, it has to be very conscious.
Yes, that's a beautiful story and analogy for us to sort of remember and give us grace. Like, so we're at the time of this podcast releasing, we're in March. And so we know that a lot of people's goals and habits have fallen well by the wayside, which is why we're re-injecting into this podcast series a reminder that, so maybe you only took a couple steps along that grass. It's time to go try again. And I think the other thing to think about, aside from realizing how long it takes, is just realizing maybe you might just want to smell the grass along the way. It's actually, it can feel hard. It can feel not fast. It can be highly irritating to walk slowly across grass, but that mindful practice of really just enjoying that journey is where you need to focus on. And when you do that enough times, then it becomes habit. Because the only unfortunate thing about habit is that you tend not to appreciate them so much. You don't really stop to smell the roses when you make a habit. It becomes instinctual. And so for that to happen does take some time, and to give ourselves grace and to recognize that we are building things for the future. I just want to say, Evala, this has been an amazing conversation with you. I think you've given us a lot of different insight and analogies and awareness for not only sober living, but groups, and why community is so important, the support, and then what we do as coaches. And so what would you like to share with our audience on how they can work with you, and what kinds of programs and offerings do you have coming up?
Presently, I have, there's a couple of things actually. If anyone is on this call or knows someone who's in recovery, I have something called the Expert Integrity Quiz, which basically is if someone is in recovery, especially if they've been sober for a little while and they're hitting a wall professionally, there's a quiz I've created that they can take on my website at www.beyondthe12.com. And it's up in the corner. It's called the Expert Integrity Quiz, and it'll kind of show you how well you're walking the talk. Are you a bronze walker? Are you a silver walker? Or are you a gold medal walker? Are you really walking your talk? And even those gold medal walkers usually have some issues if they're in a leadership position because they have that imposter syndrome. They have that mask to wear because they're doing so well. They might have billboards and ads on buses, and on the inside, they just want to fire everyone who works for them. So there are still issues that happen. And then the second thing that I have going on now is I have a new program that I've just created. It's called the Boundary Booster Blueprint, and it is an online program. And if you want more information about that, I would just suggest going to the website and contacting me about that. Or you can also take the quiz and you'll get on my email list, and then you'll get more information about that. And then on my website, there's also my other contact information. And you can contact me at Evala at Evala Rahm, EVALARAHM.com, or Evala, EVALA, at beyondthe12.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on our podcast. And in an effort to give you one last opportunity for any tips you might have, what's one thing that you would just like to share with the audience if you had just one takeaway or one thing as a pearl to inspire our group?
Oh my gosh, this is going to be silly. Make sure you clean your gutters. Because it's a habit that I do not like to do, and I did not do that in the fall. And this winter, I lost 3 out of 4 of my gutters because I live in the Midwest here in Louisville, Kentucky, and we had this huge snow and ice storm, and it ripped the gutters off because my gutters could not drain because I did not clean them, and so they turned into ice and just completely came off the house. In your gutters, it's a habit. It's a habit. Or hire someone to do it. Again, it's still a habit if you hire someone. Every spring, just do it, or every fall. I know that's kind of silly. It's so front of mind now. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much, Eva, for coming on our podcast. And for everyone else listening, thank you so much for listening to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share with a healthcare colleague. And email us to tell us what you want to hear more of at podcast@transforminghealthcarecoaching.com. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Lillian.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and share with a colleague who would benefit. Together, we can transform healthcare one person at a time. Find us anywhere you find your podcasts. Ready to take your healthcare leadership journey to the next level? Book a discovery call free at transforminghealthcarecoaching.com to explore our personalized coaching packages designed specifically for healthcare professionals like you.